really accessible building in their property.
Right.
Accessible.
I'd like to call to order tonight's special study session of January 29th, 2024 at 6:00 PM on the dot. All council members are present except for Councilmember Bowman. Do I have a motion to excuse her?
I make a motion to excuse Councilmember Bowman.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I seconded.
And by Councilmember Cole. All in favor?
Aye.
Any say no? Nope. Passes. All right. Special study session business. We are going to talk about resolution number 1669, Sumner Bonnie Lake Wastewater Treatment Facility Interlocal Agreement.
Thank you, Mayor. We can turn that directly over to Mr. Costa.
We'll turn that over directly to Mr. Kosa.
Sounds great. Thank you very much. I'm Michael Kosa, the Public Works Director. And I have a presentation regarding our Sumner Bonnie Lake Wastewater Treatment Interlocal Agreement, or ILA. It's we have a draft of the third local or ILA between the cities. And there's a picture of some of the influent that comes into our plant. So you can see Bonnie Lake and Sumner have pretty similar looking. Ours is a little bit darker, but some of the wastewater that's coming into the plant. Kind of a comparison a little bit and see how that looks. So next. So I have a short presentation to kind of describe the situation and what you'll be seeing on council agenda coming up. I'll be going over a brief history of the interlocal agreement, some background information, and then a little bit of a comparison between the old ILA versus the new ILA proposed, a staff recommendation, and then questions, of course. So the times before the ILA. So we're going to go back to the early 1980s. At that point, wastewater treatment was not as prioritized, and Bonnie Lake did not have a treatment plant in place. And EPA had reached out to them saying they were required to start treating their wastewater. So in that 1982 to 1983 timeframe, EPA said you need to start working on this, and we're going to give you a grant for it. And I think partially a loan as well. But there was a local component to that as well. So they started working on getting their own treatment plant built, and they had to go out and create a local improvement district to fund the local portion of that plant. When they did that, it was rejected by Bonnie Lake voters. And it was a pretty contentious discussion about how much it was going to cost. People didn't really want to switch over and have kind of this treatment plant constructed. It got kind of feisty. The mayor was recalled by the voters, and then the Bonnie Lake mayor and the Bonnie Lake City Council, a chunk of them resigned. So that plan A kind of went down, and they decided, well, plan B was creating an ILA between Bonnie Lake, Sumner, and then a couple other folks, Pierce County and the South Hill Sewer District, to have a combined plant that is served out of the Sumner area. So that was kind of the beginnings, and clearly editorials, political cartoons. It was a real contentious issue at the time. So that happened in 82, 83. So in 1984, after kind of all the chaos, multi-agency ILA apportioned the capacity of the facility between the different contributing jurisdictions, and everything kind of started operating from there forward until about 2002. 2002, South Hill Sewer District and Pierce County both left the agreement. They found other ways of dealing with their waste, and Bonnie Lake ended up purchasing their capacity. So at that point in 2002, we signed a new ILA without those other jurisdictions involved. it was our first ILA without them, but it was jointly between Bonnie Lake and Sumner. Go forward another 10 years to 2012. The plant was in need of a major wastewater treatment plant upgrade. The cities got together and defined and created the second ILA that helped define how to pay for that upgrade. And then another 12 years goes by, and that's today. Now, you may have heard about the need for pretreatment delegation that the Department of Ecology through our wastewater treatment permit. Ecology, I'll talk more about that in the future in the coming slides, but really there's a need for that pretreatment delegation and an agreement between us and Bonnie Lake that shows how that's going to happen. There's plenty of administrative cleanup that was of benefit. And so we drafted a third ILA for authorization. I'll go into that in the next couple slides. So a little bit more on background. You'll hear a lot about sewer rates between Sumner and Bonnie Lake. And if you go to talk with Bonnie Lake City Council members, there's a lot of concern about how much they're paying versus how much either we're paying or just overall other area parts of the region here. So Bonnie Lake has significantly higher sewer rates than Sumner. You can see on that bar chart to the right, we have both Bonnie Lake costs and Sumner costs for treating 100 gallons of sewage. And it's broken out into two parts. The orange part is collection, which is everything from when you flush your toilet up until it hits the wastewater treatment plant. And then everything in green is the cost for actually treating that waste. So that's for the actual work done at the plant. How much of your bill goes to that to fund the treatment plant? So Sumner and Bonnie Lake pay the same amount. You know, we own the plant and we are the ones that send the bill up to Bonnie Lake for their portion of it. But the bill is the same for that same 100 gallons to treat. The difference really is in the collection system. And it has to do with topography, has to do with the fact they have a big, huge wastewater, a big interceptor pipe that runs down the hill that they have to operate and maintain. They have probably 70% more pump stations in their systems that they have to own, operate, and maintain. And if you look at the topography, you know, there's kind of a rolling topography up there, whereas here, I don't know if you've been around, but it's dead flat. So even when we do need to pump, we need to pump it only so much, just enough to kind of get it going. Whereas for them, they have to really pump up hills and down hills. It's just part of the way their system was built. So they just incur more costs. And it's really important to know because you'll hear that whenever you interact with folks that are, especially the Bonnie Lake City Council members are very much aware of the cost differential. So it's just a more expensive collection system to operate, unfortunately. So with that, they have more oversight desired than maybe, you know, they would otherwise would like. So they're interested in, they like to do overall rate reductions when they've either run for council to be part of council, they'll run on lowering sewer rates. So there's a high interest in at least keeping them the same and trying to keep them as low as possible. Because they understand that their public has an idea that there's just it's more expensive than other places. They're also hesitant to reinvest in expensive and aging infrastructure because they're like, well, that's going to increase the cost. So, you know, do we need to do that? Well, it's like, we have a treatment plant to run. We want to make sure that we have that running for years and years and we don't have, you know, a catastrophic issue. They're saying, well, it's end of life, but can we go a little longer? Because they want to keep the rates low. They also sometimes question the validity of existing charges. And what we really want to do is provide more transparency for that so that they can see that we're not doing anything different. We're not charging them any differently. So here's some of the challenges with the current ILA. And so just to give you an idea, and then we'll show how we're going to fix and try to improve those. So we completed, the first one was completed with quite a bit of political pressure involved. There was a requirement to get this wastewater treatment plant expansion in place so that growth could continue happening in the communities. So it was kind of negotiated under kind of a stressful environment. It was partially written by members of both councils. There were kind of heated discussions between them in rooms. And that doesn't necessarily build the best, lasting document. Maybe it solved some of the political problems of that day. It references the concurrent wastewater treatment plant expansion from 2012, which many of those sections we don't really need anymore. They don't really mean anything to anybody. They were great for the time, but that's ancient history at this point. There were no definitions of terms in the last agreement, so left staff trying to interpret the meanings and original intent of some of the actual text they wrote. And the one good thing though is they had identified that a pretreatment addendum was going to be required. Everybody kind of knew that going in, so they even wrote that in. Now is that time when we need that pretreatment addendum. So highlights of the third draft, which is the third version, which is this draft ILA that's going to be before you. Administratively, we cleaned up the definition of terms. We changed the billing process from a monthly billing process to a quarterly billing process. That just saves everybody a lot of additional billings that really are very similar among the different types of bills we get. So quarterly billing made a lot more sense. The document's written to be timeless as opposed to specific. So really took out any of that language related to that treatment plant expansion of the time. There was also this pilot fee that was discussed in the document. It really wasn't representative of anything, and it was very kind of cloudy exactly what it meant. So we got that removed as well. So transparency. Here's how we added transparency. We made the agreement, we put in a specific agreement review every 5 years so that the document could be edited as people desire, if people desire to make changes. Before there was no agreement, like a review cycle. We added a termination clause. Bonnie Lake has the right to be able to terminate originally we proposed 10 years, but the one edit they've made, and if you had the original agreement that you reviewed in your packet, it said 10 years now. This is all past the Bonnie Lake City Council, and the only change they wanted was a 5-year notice, so that if they gave us 5 years, they would be able to say, hey, we're going to leave, we're going to do something else. And that gives us adequate time to figure out how we're going to react to that. But it's also highly unlikely that they'll be leaving. It's very expensive to build a new treatment plant, something they're exploring, but unlikely in terms of the cost that would be needed and the amount of kind of bureaucratic paperwork involved in trying to change your sewer basin. So it's a very heavy lift, and we'll be kind of tracking that, making sure it doesn't become a surprise to us. Also in transparency, we are in the new agreement where we have quarterly JAC meetings, which are the Joint Advisory Committee. Previously, we had annual JAC meetings, and one of our city council members got to go to that, as well as one of their council members, and then some administrative staff from either city. This is kind of probably a way that affects this group more, is that we're upping that to 3 council members from each city. One thing we've discussed is maybe just making the Public Works Committee that 3-member group that would attend these quarterly meetings. So we would meet once a quarter, mainly to review the quarterly billing, talk about any budget items, any issues we're having at the treatment plant, but it would give Bonnie Lake the ability to have more contact with it because they just have the desire for that. And so gives them the chance to discuss with us more, understand, ask questions. Why are you doing that? Why are we doing this? And we can help them understand some of the reasons and, make good decisions. And then also, of course, the new pretreatment section, which is the required need from the MPDES permit from the state Department of Ecology. So our staff recommendation is to authorize the mayor to execute this draft ILA, which like I mentioned before, has been approved by the city of Bonnie Lake. And there was a lot of discussion up there about it, and it ended up passing, and so we said as soon as it passes, we'll bring it to this body. I think they're generally somewhat happy with it, but they know it's better than the one that we currently have, which is really important to them. But highlights again, adopting a timeless agreement. It's developed by our staff, their staff, legal over the past 18 months. So it's been a lot of work from our staff level. It updates the agreement during a non-contentious time. There's no expansion planned right now or expected in the near future. So this is a good time to make some of these language changes. Increases the transparency between the two parties. Doesn't significantly change anything financially or ownership rights. It provides ample notification for agreement termination, and then it also defines that pre-treatment relationship. So with that, any questions you may
Any
have?
questions? This Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you, Michael. Good job explaining this. I just have some questions to help me better understand a few things. What does it mean, administrative cleanup needed? You commented that in a section, I think that said 2024 pre-treatment. Then you said that. What does that mean?
So a lot of, that's just a general term I use that said, we have a lot of these, we have a lot of the pieces of the old expansion language that talked about how we're going to pay for this expansion. What if you back out? What if something goes wrong? How are we going to deal with change orders during that event? And so what I was trying to say is we're removing a lot of that language because we don't have an active.
Okay, so it doesn't mean anything to have it in there.
It means that that all of that language is obsolete, essentially. If the project is done, we're moving on. We don't need to think about that anymore. That wasn't really important. And additionally, the definition of terms section is another administrative cleanup. Like we have all these things that we had in the agreement that were just never defined. And so it leaves staff to say, well, how exactly are we to, what do you mean when you say capacity here versus capital projects? Instead, we have an actual section in there that's just definition of terms.
Sure.
So we all can say, well, when I say that over here, I mean this. I mean, it's really important. It was really confusing to everyone.
Yeah, that's good to do that. I think that's the current method of agreements is I have a definition of terms. So you said, I believe you said that the Bonnie Lake cost is more because they have bigger pipes and then more pumps needed, and they incur more costs in the collection system. So why are they complaining about their rates being higher than ours?
They're not complaining. They're complaining about their rates.
They're complaining about new rates?
They're complaining about the rates that they pay. And whether or not they assign that to us or not, I think sometimes we are a convenient target.
Of course.
But it also, they really need to talk through how they want to get their costs under control. And I think our perspective and those numbers came from a study from FCS. You remember FCS coming in?
Yes.
So that came from one of their studies that we asked them to do to really say, all right, can you please analyze this because it's important to them. And it wasn't always those numbers weren't always fully out there. And I think these are numbers that kind of came together in the past 6 to 9 months. So people kind of had the idea in their head that, oh, Sumner's really soaking Bonnie Lake. And in reality, we're charging the same that we're charging our own citizens.
Sure.
But it was that since that split wasn't really defined before, and that graph, that bar chart wasn't there, people were getting confused, and they say, oh, they must be charging us way more. People look at their sewer bill in Sumner and their sewer bill in Bonnie Lake and saying, what is going on? It's all going to the same place.
Yeah. So you're thinking that they are wanting a reduction in the rates in this new ILA mainly because the recently elected council members said that they would seek a reduction? Is that what you're implying?
It's quite possible. I mean, I'm sure there's many ways for them to lower rates and they can choose how they want to manage their sewer utility. But, you know, I think that there's a lot of folks. There's definitely a concern from their council that they want to lower rates.
Well, there's a concern here too, so I can understand that. This whole thing seems ridiculous to me. I mean, that's my opinion. The volumes from Bonnie Lake are higher than our volume going into the treatment plant. Probably because they have more toilets going into the system. I don't know. So anyway, that's just an editorial comment. One last question, if you don't mind. You're saying that the quarterly meetings with staff and council members from each side would bring about greater transparency. I'm questioning, not that I don't mind transparency, I think that's a great idea, but knowing how our Public Works Committee works, you have 3 council members who don't know a whole lot about much of this, but we have 3 experts on your side of the table. Is there anything to be gained by having council members present?
So that's a great question. You know, Sumner and Bonnie Lake staff have been working together closely. And I feel that on a staff level, we have a very good working relationship. When it comes to council, there's a lot of concerns. And from between the Bonnie Lake City Council and Sumner in general, and also Bonnie Lake City Council and their staff. And I don't think they have the relationship that we do. I feel like we've been able to provide the information that council members want. As you know, and I just feel that, you know, say Bonnie Lake council members would appreciate having the ability to have more oversight. They just don't have the oversight ability right now that they could have in this, if they chose to come to these meetings. And that's, you know, there was a lot of discussion of whether they would like to have actual voting on a number of the issues in those JAC meetings. And we've kind of advocated for saying we own the plant, so we'd like to make it as simple as possible for us to run as opposed to having a larger committee. And so we kind of pushed back on that, and this is where we landed in between.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Councilmember Potato.
Yeah, I was just curious, is Tahali part of their sewer
It is not.
system? It's not, okay. And then what is the capacity of the wastewater treatment plant? How, you know, there's a lot of growth here in Sumner. There's a lot of growth up in Bonnie Lake. So how long will the wastewater treatment plant be valid or?
Sure. Yeah, we have, so it's a 6.1 MGD plant. So, and right now, I think we were just talking about this. It was somewhere in the kind of in the 4-ish range, if you wanted to kind of think of how much are we using versus how much capacity we have. So we've done sewer plans that look at, you know, a much larger range, especially looking out 10 years specifically. And we don't see an immediate need for an expansion in the next 10 years. Sumner's growth, not looking to kind of exceed the capacity that we have. Bonnie Lakes, long-term, is going to likely exceed the capacity of our current plant and require another expansion. When that occurs, we're looking at the cost of that expansion being borne by Bonnie Lake, because they're the ones that are really causing it. We've kind of got our capacity purchased and we're not growing our sewer needs by leaps and bounds, and we're going to stay within kind of the range that we currently have in the plant that we've currently purchased. So.
Yeah, well, it's good if they're, you know, take some of the burden, because they, I mean, I think are they twice as big as we are? And,
Yes.
you know, they have potential for a lot of growth. So,
And, you know, one would presume they'll be funding a lot of that, the need for expansion if we get to that point with, you know, development dollars, I would imagine. To try to offset it rather than going after their ratepayers specifically. So I think it's that those new developments will be paying for those plant expansion needs. We would hope.
yeah,
Any
okay,
other questions?
thank you.
Councilmember Brown.
They pay more for their rates. Does that extra money go towards maintaining the infrastructure on the hill?
Yes.
That was pretty cool.
Good.
Councilmember Elfers.
Is there like a 30-second, like, what is it? Pre-treatment's been something that's been talked about for a long time. I don't know if that is, what is that?
Oh, I'd love to talk to you.
Is it
about
30
pre-treatment.
seconds or less, or is it longer?
Oh,
I don't
no.
know.
The elevator speed.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the quick answer is pre-treatment is, we are, is the need for someone to go out and it's the need for us to regulate businesses, certain types of business, especially businesses that are more likely to contribute waste streams that need to be more regulated. And talk to them about ways to make modifications to to pre-treat their waste so that we're not getting that our plant isn't hit by the more high strength wastes or inappropriate wastes. It could be anything from dentist offices as one easy example, trying to keep mercury out of our treatment plant. They can do all their mercury removal on site, then the rest of the system doesn't bear the cost of having to remove that mercury with very low levels as our requirements through the state. So that would be one example, but it could be auto parts stores or auto related businesses, you know, oil changes, those sorts of things. It can be our our different industries out in the manufacturing industrial center. We have bakeries out there that are producing a higher strength waste than what domestic wastes are. And so really the standing up a program is getting a pre-treatment program that has staff that goes out to these businesses, visits them, analyzes what those businesses do and makes sure that and finds ways to, well, first permit them. That's one of the requirements from the state is that we have to permit these businesses, but then make sure that they're putting the right things down the drain.
Okay, yeah, and then I think a question that Jason doesn't ask.
Oh, go ahead. I
A
can.
question that I think is kind of, I got little answers from other council members, but I think the idea of like, so what do we own and what are we responsible to maintain as a city in this agreement? Because I feel like the collection cost, to me, it sounds like that means we're maintaining their pump stations and that's why, or are they billing out? I'm just trying to figure out how that whole mechanism works. What do
I
we-
might have confused it a little bit because I kind of put those all together, but so the city of Sumner bills our residents, City of Bonnie Lake bills their residents. But then the city of Sumner also directly bills Bonnie Lake, the city of Bonnie Lake, with that one slide that we had, the green portion of that. We calculate what the cost it is to treat, and we send a bill directly to them for that. So essentially what happens is they get that bill, they pay us for, almost as a customer. And then they go and bill their folks, Bonnie Lake citizens and residents.
We're not driving up the collection costs. That's their deal.
That's their choice of how they manage their collection system, but from a,
Okay, and then one last question was on the new ILA, is there any, if their goal is to reduce their sewer costs, is there any mechanism in here that would benefit them in reducing their costs, or is it, how does that relate to this new ILA?
the one probably that is somewhat useful to them is that pilot fee. It was a 5% fee that was supposed to sunset in the last couple of years anyway. But they can at least see that as a somewhat of a credit. It was, I don't even understand the entirety of it, but it was kind of a
Yeah, none of us,
artifact from the
yeah, we
past.
weren't here to negotiate those. It's pilot stands for payment in lieu of taxes. Has something to do with the expansion in 2012. To your point, though, Councilmember Elfers, I think one of Bonnie Lake's major areas of concern and the biggest way they can help control their sewer utility rates is through the capital improvements that are done at our treatment plant. So they want oversight or at least knowledge of what capital improvements are being done at the plant and possibly influence, well, do we pick, for example, coming up, this dryer or this dryer? There's two different dollar points here. Which one should we go with? And that's where they want some say. But all they really can do is they act as an advisory to you all as the owner of our wastewater treatment facility. It's ultimately Sumner's decision of what capital improvements are done. Bonnie Lake just wants to make sure they're aware so they can adjust their budgets and rates accordingly.
Okay, well, that was my last question, was just like, does this affect that new dryer coming up? Is it, and it sounds like it doesn't affect our final decision, but it gives them some more advisory and transparency. Is that?
Correct.
It really benefits their council. I mean, we've always been very transparent with their staff. We've always tried to give them all the information we possibly can. We're not trying to hide anything, but this gives them an opportunity to have a conversation if they want to have that at one of those Jack meetings. So that's a move towards that transparency that hopefully helps them.
Okay, that sounds great. Other questions I have?
Anybody else? No? Thank you, Michael. Nice
I
job.
can just clarify, is council ready to see this next week for consideration?
Are you ready?
All right,
Yeah.
thank you.
All right. So now we'll move on with City Administrator Jason Wilson on city facilities update.
Thank you, Mayor. We'll just wait just a moment for the presentation to come up. Okay, tonight, council, I'm going to be giving you an update, a very high level update of our city facilities and some of the challenges that we're experiencing right now. You're probably wondering why now? Why are we doing this in 2024? I can tell you that this has been a topic of discussion for probably the last 7 or 8 years. In fact, the last city administrator, Mr. Galley, one of his last goals provided to him by Mayor Enslow and then followed up by Mayor Pugh was figure out what to do with our operations center. And because we had definitely outgrown that. And as you know, over the last several years, we've purchased land, we've gone through a design, we've actually started some of the early pre-construction activities out there. So it's not that we've totally been kicking the can for all these years, but we've been definitely focused more on the operations side of the house rather than all the other facility needs throughout the city. We also have a lot of delayed maintenance that has compounded costs over the years. I will say our continued growth just in the city as a whole, but also as our staff is really pushing our facilities past what they were designed for. And I'll be pointing that out as we go through, but we have some definite limitations when it comes to water and restrooms and other facilities that are needed to provide really the city's mission. And that's what I want you to take away from tonight, hopefully, is that the conditions of some of our city facilities are starting to impact our ability to meet our mission of providing those needed and valued services that promote our sense of community. So as we go through this presentation, we have put a rating scale up of hammers. One being, okay, this is just some basic normal maintenance all the way up to 4 that, we have some urgent need or it's actually under active construction. We are going to try something new, starting with this facilities presentation. We'll be creating a hot sheet for you that we'll be able to include throughout the year, just kind of show you where we're at and different steps, kind of a reference sheet, real one pager that will help you stay in the loop on how we're progressing on these. All right, so we're going to start right at the top here, the building we're in today, City Hall. I think some of you know that we're sitting in the old fire station bay. This was built in 1935. And then in the 90s, when the new fire station was located on Harrison Street, this building got a refresh on this side. And then about 99, 2000-ish, We built the other half of this building, tore down an old police station and where it's able to add on and build City Hall as we know it today. Back in 2000, it was built with a 20-year life, so we're 24 years into that this year. So top issues, no surprise. When you're at the end of a building's life cycle, you're dealing with capacity issues, deferred maintenance, and then technology and safety has really changed in the last 20 years of what is required for a government facility. As far as funding, most of our known maintenance is funded, but some of our more costly long-term maintenance is not. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. Just for your information too, we have 72 full-time employees based out of this building today. And that includes 25 in the police department and 47 employees upstairs, comprising the public works, administration, community development, and development services. If you've been upstairs recently, you know that most of the easy squeezes have been built out. There's not a whole lot of options for further office space. We have basically two areas that we could probably stick a cubicle now, but they're not the most ideal. We have definitely benefited from a shift from our paper files to digital. It's freed up a lot of closet space, some of which has been turned into offices. The windowless offices, that is. I mean, there's a lot of which, hey, an office is better than sitting out in the hallway, which we've done that too. Really, the square footage of this building is really deceiving. You look on the outside, it's a beautiful building, but it has a lot of slanted ceilings, which then shrinks your square footage that's actually usable for office space. So a lot of our offices have slanted ceilings, so they might be a little oversized on the square footage, but there's no way to divide them into two offices without somebody sitting like this all day. The restrooms and meeting rooms, storage break rooms are definitely exceeding capacity. We have a very small break room upstairs. We have 3 restrooms for those 47 employees. I was just telling the mayor today, multiple times today, both of the restrooms on this end of the building were occupied. It makes it a challenge, especially on days when we're a little heavier here at City Hall. The police department patrol and locker rooms exceed capacity. We have no locker space available in the men's locker room anymore, which is a challenge. Parking our secure lot. We have too many vehicles that really should be in secure parking than we actually have room for, which means we're parking some city vehicles in the unsecure lot. We are very strategic about which ones end up in the unsecure lot from a risk standpoint. Our employee lot also exceeds capacity, which results in employees parking out on the street, taking up street parking. I will say work from home and the hybrid work environment has certainly been a help to many of these challenges. Although we have 47 people that work in City Hall, we are probably never ever at 47 in the building when you look at just accrued leave usage and then the hybrid work environment. We're already using the hot desking upstairs and work from home options, like I mentioned. If you're not familiar with hot desking, that means that you have more than one employee sharing a workspace, or you might have an employee that's bouncing from whatever desk is vacant that day. We also have no space for locating staff at alternate locations, and we have no plans or estimates for a new building or this expansion.
Just a second, Jason, do
Should
you
we ask
have?
questions as we go? Do you want us to ask, or just wait till the very end?
You know what? I appreciate that because I forgot to mention that. Questions as we go, please. But there are 3 policy items that I'd like some input from council on, and I've called those out during this presentation, but I want that specific policy input at the end if we could. But if you have just general questions as we go, if we could go through the 2 slides per facility and then maybe ask the questions, if that's fair. Okay. So City Hall, the things that have been funded were the technology upgrades for remote options that's been completed over the last 3 years. This council chambers was renovated in 2021. We did fence our vehicle lot that was completed in 2019. That was paid for with a WCI grant after we had several incidents in our back parking lot that necessitated enhanced security. For the last couple of years, we've been converting every mailroom closet to office space that we can. We did replace the roof last year, which was part of the budget. In this year's budget, you have approved the replacement of our security camera system. Most of the cameras in this building were put in when it was remodeled in 2000 and just replaced on an as-needed basis, but the whole system is ready for a full upgrade. The budget has included some minor HVAC repair. Most of our units are end of life, so we're just replacing them as they fail. What was not funded in the last budget is the window repairs and replacements. Last estimate was $400,000 to replace our windows. Particularly on this end of the building, none of them sealed, so it's a constant energy loss and they're failing. They got, like my office has a fogged out window all the time, and whenever the wind blows, it's just straight through the building. And then also you can see a lot of our window casings are rotten and splitting on the building. And then the whole building needs paint, which can't really be done effectively until after you do the windows. And then larger, we have HVAC needs. Like I said, we're replacing one at a time, but that's really not an efficient way to make sure that our system stays balanced and operating efficiently. So happy to answer any questions about City Hall.
Go ahead, Andy.
I just had one, and it might apply to other items on here, but I just was curious on the capacity issues, or is the city looking into, I know you were doing a big facility up in the north end for the operations. We're doing that design right now for the Heritage Park. I feel like we have several projects. Is there any consideration while we're doing the design to see if we can add capacity? And like the Heritage Park one would be a great one if you had an upstairs or something where you had some staff. Is that something that somebody's looking at since we're already
Yes.
doing that? Okay.
Yeah, we are looking at the Heritage Park design, adding some office space over there. We've also gone back to our design on the operational facility and already converted one of the large conference rooms to accommodate some cubicles.
So we might see some options on
Yeah.
there. Okay.
Yep, we already starting to think ahead.
Anybody else before we go?
All right, the senior center built in 1998. You know, this building has largely, it looks like it did when it opened in 1998. As beautiful pink or mauve trim everywhere and teal. And I joke, eventually it's going to come back into
I think so.
before you know it. Obviously, this is a picture. I don't even know when this picture was, but they were taking down the wallpaper, but I don't recognize any of those people, so I imagine it's been several years. Some of the maintenance is partially funded, and without some investment, it does limit its use for other options. I'm just thinking it's hung up here. Doesn't like this slide. It must be a big picture. All right. Like I said, little investment in the last 25 years. It doesn't have any auxiliary power. It is something that we've looked at in the last couple of budget cycles, but never really gets funded because there's higher priorities. It does have some ADA needs to be maintain compliance with that. So this last budget year, we did fund paint. It is scheduled to be completed this year. We also included some money to replace the counter in the front to make it ADA compliant. We did have to redirect that money to automate the bathroom doors because they were heavy and we had some complaints from the patrons out there. So that had to be addressed sooner than later. The other thing that was unique last year, we had an unbudgeted expenditure to replace the dishwasher. That commercial dishwasher was $40,000. What's alarming is most of the other appliances in the building are that same era, and we've been replacing them, but there does come a point where you can't repair them anymore and you have to replace them. What's not funded is the failing partitions. If you recall, in that building, it has these big folding doors like you'd see in a school. And those are damaged and really difficult to shut. We did recently apply for a CDBG grant, $150,000 to replace those, as well as the flooring. We'll see if we are awarded that later this year. Questions on the senior center?
Any questions on the senior center? Councilmember Cole.
So I was just curious, in your presentation, you mentioned that nothing is done outside of it being a senior center because the building itself is dated and there could be some other options, maybe for evenings, that kind of thing. Is there a committee looking at what the possibilities are well before even any renovations take place?
No, and I should clarify, what I meant by that was, the lack of a generator limits our ability to use it for an emergency, as an emergency shelter. It really wasn't for rentals or anything like that. I think rentals, facilities in general, is a topic that we need to explore more, because we do have that senior center. If we build a building at Heritage Park, that'll be another one that will be available for rent. And I think one of the policy decisions this group is gonna have to look at is, do we want to be in the rental business? Who manages that? What kind of staff allocation does that take to do that? So right now, we're not looking at any cosmetic upgrades to the senior center other than the exterior paint and hopefully the partitions and flooring, if we can get it awarded through CDBG.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Councilmember Stewart.
I understand the need to redirect the funding for the ADA counter. Is that item gonna be put on for the next biennium, or are we gonna try to find some surplus funds somewhere to fix that?
Right now, we'll see what the paint comes in at, and then we'll make that decision if we can squeak it out of this year or we put it into next year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, cemetery office, this is not where our field crews work out of. This is where our administrative support staff works out of. This is where we do all of our plot sales, marker sales, things of that nature. This building was built in 1983. We did a renovation of it in 2017. This area that you're looking at now used to be an unfinished garage. We went in and finished that as a place to meet with our customers. Much more professional, much nicer, and our staff member that did this work just did a phenomenal job. Interestingly enough, though, one of the issues I hear is there's no potable water in this building. So if you were to turn around from this table, you would see a kitchenette with a kitchen sink and a coffee maker, which is very misleading, right? Because we have customers in this, but there's no real potable water, and they should not be drinking the water or washing with the water that's there, right? So that's an issue. Because of the era of the building, building security is a challenge, as well as ongoing maintenance, because it was built in 1983, and other than the interior, there's really been nothing done on the outside. Similarly, at the cemetery, we have the operations facility. This was built in 1978, cinder block building. Biggest challenge is capacity, and also no potable water and some security issues. So our staff, as you can see there, has a water jug, but no potable water. As part of our larger operations facility project, council did approve the construction of a new operations facility. It is currently under construction. The weather, unfortunately, has delayed us a little bit, but we anticipate it being ready to occupy in late spring. The old structure will be reused for some police evidence storage. This solves some timing issues with the old golf course facility, which is currently being used, the White River Restoration, as well as our new operations facility. What's not funded, though, is this building will not have potable water either. And that's a challenge. And I don't think that's acceptable for our staff. So what I've asked our Public Works Department to do just last week is we're working on an irrigation project out there off the West Well. The West Well is not potable water, and that's actually what is feeding these buildings today. But I've asked them to get us potable water to all three of our cemetery buildings. And what that will require us to do is hook into the Puyallup water system. Because while this area is in the Sumner water service area, for about 4 decades now, it's been served by the city of Puyallup under an agreement. So we need to renegotiate that interlocal with Puyallup to just solidify that they're going to continue to provide water in our service area. While at the same time, we will become a customer of the city of Puyallup and buy water for our facilities.
Councilmember Patel.
No, I think it's deplorable that you have any facilities with potable, not potable water, whatever. I mean, I think all the employees deserve to have, safe water, and I'm just really shocked that this is going on and continually. So I hope that you can get an agreement with Puyallup and get them water. So.
Yeah, I can assure you, we'll just become a water customer. We'll have water out there. It's
Yeah.
just getting it designed and getting it hooked up to all the facilities.
Okay, good.
Anybody else? Nope.
All right, next one is the DMI site. You may recall about a month ago, council approved the acceptance of some grant funds and local dollars to purchase DMI drilling. It was built in 2004. Most of the funding came from the flood control zone district, the surf board, and also floodplains by design, a little bit from our stormwater utility. The biggest challenge is there's in this part of the community, there's not a lot else out there. And we've owned the building for about 2 months and we've recovered several stolen vehicles from our property that have been dumped there. Just for a point of reference, make sure everybody understands where we're talking about here. This is as part of our White River Restoration Project. This is north of 16th Street in what we call the Pacific Point Bar. This is the largest parcel out there. The city has acquired almost everything on that point. We have two left. I know for sure one, maybe two that we are in the proper process of acquiring. As a reminder, the future for this is going to be flood mitigation and habitat. So we bought this knowing that the goal was to demolish this building. But hey, it's a newer building built in 2004, and we said, you know what, is there an option or should we consider using this for some staff capacity in the meantime? And really what we came to the conclusion of is while the grant would allow us to do this temporarily, the risk really outweighs the benefit. There's just too much property crime out there. We don't want to put our equipment out there and risk it getting stolen. With the best security system and police checking out at all times, it is what it is. Yeah, we can only do so much. Our decision got made a lot more clear during the really cold weather. A couple of weeks ago, we actually had a pipe burst, and of course, nobody's out there visiting it regularly. So we ended up with about 4 inches of water in the entire building. There is no heat to this building at this time. So we have a very wet building that is just sitting there. And while this picture shows vinyl floors, most of the building is carpet. So you can imagine what we have going on out there. So we are recommending the demolition. We're not sure of the cost at this time. Like I said, though, the purchase of the land was funded for the White River Restoration Project. The plan when we bought it was to demo it, so it was not unanticipated. So we'll come back to that one at the end. Any questions besides the policy question we're going to ask?
Questions? Oh. We're good.
Okay. Central Well, we built this in 2016. Once again, we do house staff out of this building currently because the operations center is full. So our water folks are here and we are in the process of moving some storm folks here. Interestingly enough, this was built for operations, but the office space was value engineered out of this project, but could have been included in a future phase. This is a picture of the main pumping room. You can see there's actually a staff workstation sitting right there. It's not uncommon for people to do virtual meetings just from that workstation there. Not ideal. You can imagine that the hum of the pumps can be a challenge. What we have recently done is we located a job shack on the site to house staff until an operations facility is complete. It houses our water employees, which is 3 employees, a storm employee, and our seasonals will be out here as well. They don't have a bathroom in that or kitchenette or anything in that job shack. They'll have to come into the actual central well to use a restroom. Questions about this one?
I had a
Oh,
quick
Ann,
question.
Go ahead.
I'm not sure I understood. She said biggest challenge, it says built for operations, office space value, engineered out could be, I don't know, what does that mean? Could be included, yeah.
Okay, so it was built for operations, right? The main point of this building is to pump water out of the ground and treat it before it enters our system. My understanding is back in when this was built, when it was being designed, it had some office space in there and they cut that portion of the building off to save money.
Got it. That's okay. Thank you.
That's value engineering. Very technical terms. It's a fancy way of saying we cut the scope. Metro Animal Shelter. Top issues, capacity, some basic safety. There's no funding for this. I think the biggest challenge is the facility itself is owned by the city of Puyallup, but we run it on a day-to-day basis as part of Metro Animal Services. For those of you who are not familiar with it, it was not designed to be a modern shelter. It was actually designed in the 90s to be a temporary holding facility for the Humane Society. So animals could be booked there temporarily and then moved to Tacoma for final disposition. So adoption, return to owner, etc. But when the Humane Society got out of that business, it became the animal shelter for Puyallup Sumner. And then eventually Bonnie Lake was added, Edgewood was added, Milton, Pacific, and Algona. So it's continued to grow. Annually, it sees about 1,100 animals walk through the door. That's quite a few. But inadequate customer and employee space. There's one toilet for the whole facility. It's actually off the main lobby. That's also where our animal control officers and shelter staff have walker space. So it's kind of a combined room. So we don't even allow the public to use that facility. Minimal storage. There's no fire suppression in the dog kennel area, no HVAC in the dog kennel area. It also has inadequate outdoor exercise. I will say the city of Puyallup is working on a project to increase some outdoor exercise space, and that hopefully will be coming online this year. The high demand, obviously impacts the lack of space. Right now, if you have a pet, you know that veterinary care is incredibly difficult to get. If your animal's sick, it's hard to get them in. It's hard to find vets that are accepting new patients. We rely on our vets to perform our pet alteration surgeries. And because they're so overwhelmed already, we haven't been able to secure long-term contracts for alterations for our animals. That means that the animals have to stay in our shelter longer before they can be adopted out to their new owner. A lot of rescue organizations are also going out of business or are at capacity. We are seeing increased number of owner surrenders. We hypothesize that's because of COVID pets, people that got pets during the pandemic that can no longer care for them. I think the economy also has an impact on that. Pets are not an essential thing. When you look at things, I love my pet, very essential to me, but at the end of the day, people need food on their plate, but sometimes for their pets. And then staffing levels, we are struggling with our staffing levels. We've done some temporary hires to increase our kennel technician staff to make sure that we can get the kennel cleaned on a daily basis. This is an operation that runs 365 days a year. Those pets need to be fed, watered, and the kennels cleaned. What's not fun is any expansion or alternate facility. Just prior to the pandemic, we did do an RFQ looking for other shelter providers. There's not a whole lot in this area, as you can imagine. You have the Auburn Valley Humane Society, which is running right up here on East Valley, right as you enter Auburn. And then you have the Tacoma Pierce County Humane Society. Both of those are experiencing capacity challenges themselves. Auburn Valley is also funded by the city of Auburn, and they're not interested in contracting out space. So you were really stuck left with the Tacoma Pierce County Humane Society. And we've been actively engaging them as recently as a month and a half ago, trying to find possibly a long-term shelter solution. We're also continuing to meet with our partners, including the city of Puyallup, on what their long-term desires are for animal sheltering. And sheltering is not necessarily, doesn't have to include enforcement. You could split them out, right? You could keep enforcement, but contract for sheltering. Questions about the shelter?
Councilmember Elfers.
For this one, we don't own the building. So I'm just trying to make sure I understand what the update is about maintaining the facility. Is our ILA or our agreement have some kind of are we required? Do we propose things, or how does that work in this thing, since we're looking at it for a facilities maintenance thing, but we don't own the building? How does that, besides more space? You said that.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge with sheltering is we have to figure out what to do with these pets, whether we own the building, Puyallup owns the building, or we contract for services. The point of including in here is what we have for capacity for this essential service is not long-term and we need to address it sooner than later. And whether that's us doing it or we do it with our partners in our contract cities, it's to be determined at this point.
Got it. Okay, so it's a little more broad than some of the other ones. Okay.
Yeah,
Anybody
but it
else?
is a general fund facility at the end of the day.
No? All right.
All right, the Parks Office. A couple years ago, you might recall that our Parks Department used to be out at the old golf course pump house. And I'll just move to that. We relocated them from this facility for a number of reasons. Number one, every time the water came up, it flooded. We also had some pretty serious vermin problems. They did have running water in that building, but no restrooms. They had to walk up to the other golf course building to use the restroom. Where they are now is at the wastewater treatment facility. We brought in a temporary job shack for them to be in. They still don't have a bathroom or running water. That has posed a challenge even as recent as last week. We're trying to make sure that our employees have adequate restroom facilities, and sometimes they get creative, and we've had to make sure that they make it all the way up to the wastewater treatment facility to use the restroom. Funny fact, I was told by the Parks Department that they have not had a running water restroom in over a decade. So definitely a challenge for them. And this is really one of those chicken and the egg situation, right? Permanent offices require the sale of the golf course so we can move forward with the operations facility, but where do we put them in the meantime that's cost effective? And they have a lot of equipment that, they have the garbage truck, all their trailers, chippers, trucks, a whole bunch of this. So it's all being stored mostly outside right now, which is a challenge. And they do have 2 garage bays that they're borrowing from the treatment plant temporarily that put some of their small tools so they're secure. Question on parks.
Any questions on parks? Nope. Okay.
Wastewater treatment facility, the operations buildings in particular were built in 1956 and 1972. As you probably can imagine, a lot has changed since we first started treating waste. One of the operations building housed a lot of chlorine, and that's how they would clean the water. It'd be dosing it from there. We've since repurposed those buildings to be storage areas. Major issues at the treatment plant are really staff capacity areas, a lot of deferred maintenance because of the building's age, and just overall security. A lot of those buildings I just mentioned, those 2 in particular, they've been converted so many times that they really struggle with vermin out there, even with professional pest control. I just heard last week from our wastewater superintendent that every day the electrician has to go in and clean the mouse droppings from their workstation before they can actually get to work. Not an ideal situation. Really, some of these buildings were designed for other uses like electrical rooms and chlorine rooms and things like that. So converting them has been difficult. Some of the door casings are rotten out. A lot of times when we haven't been able to find replacements, we just end up pulling the doors and sealing them up with concrete. The lunchroom doubles as the staff work area, training room, et cetera. When these buildings, including the most recent one that the lunchroom is in, was built, we didn't have computers. Our employees were not using computers on a daily basis to do their jobs. Completely different. Everything is automated out there. Everything they do, not everything they do, but a lot of things that they do require them to look at their SCADA system and stuff on their computers. So not a lot of good areas for that. The building security system is failing right now. We're in the process of researching how to replace that. The updated, does require an update to our door and gate access control system. And then it does have a third slide. Ongoing security concerns with the public parking lot and restroom that are outside the treatment facility. And then I just want to put on everybody's radar, we do have that dryer replacement that's coming up for replacement probably next year for a contract award. But that is something that we need to continue moving forward, because if you don't have the dryer, you're not producing biosolids, which means you are having to truck your product to Eastern Washington to dispose of it. So it's very important. You can imagine how costly that would be. So what we have done recently, we have added offices where possible. Did invest in improved fencing for security. Later this year, we'll be upgrading all the surveillance cameras out there. That'll be completed over the summer. And, you know, they've done a lot of work on energy efficiency, a lot of work with PSC really to lower the amount of electrical use that we're doing for the treatment, saving tens of thousands of dollars annually from the work that they're doing. Questions on the treatment plants?
Councilmember Elfers.
This one, is this not general fund? The dryer is not general fund, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Anybody down here? Oh,
All right, next up is our current operations center. It was built in 2000. So this is also a 20-year building that we have hit about 24 years on. I think all of you have been out there at one time or another. There's definitely capacity issues, not just from the staff, but also equipment and vehicles. We do have some liability risk out there. We're currently evaluating some improvements to reduce loss. We've had several items stolen from out there, equipment, fuel, things of that nature. Also, we need to make some safety improvements. A lot of times we have one employee working out there alone because all the people in the field are out working on site. So we're trying to make some improvements to keep that employee more safe. Funding, you know, this building, as you know, is scheduled for replacement. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Like I said, we're making some things that aren't funded are some minor security upgrades to the gate and fencing, to reduce loss and improve access control. You'll likely see a budget amendment later this year to address some of those issues in the short term. And capacity is going to be an issue until we get the new facility online. It's a good segue into the new facility. You know, the reason why this hasn't moved forward is funding at this point. We've talked for years that the funding for this is likely going to be the sale of the golf course. And we are getting closer on that. Right now, we have completed phase one. It's the demo and preload of the site. Why I say we've completed it, all the dirt's there. Now we're just letting it sit so we can, before we can start construction. But all the dirt's been moved on site. If you haven't been out there, it's rather impressive. 6 to 8 feet of dirt. It's tall. What we are proposing, I'll go over why here in just a minute, is dividing the next two things into two phases. So it used to be that we'd build the whole thing, the north and the south parcels at once, but we are recommending separating those out. We want to do that because while the full facility is ready to go out to bid right now, we don't have the general fund portion of the funding secure. So as a reminder, the construction costs for this facility are almost split evenly, 50% general fund and 50% revenue bonds through our utilities. The general fund cannot support the debt service, which is estimated to be $1 million a year. So that's why staff continues to recommend using golf course sale proceeds for that portion. The challenge, we have another chicken and the egg. The current decant facility that we're using is on the property of the existing golf course, or the old golf course. So that's not going to be usable once we start construction of the White River Restoration Project. So you have this timing of, okay, if we don't get moving on this piece of it, what happens when we start construction? If we don't have a decant facility, then it just leads to more challenges. You may also recall that we received a Public Works Trust Fund loan for the north parcel, particularly the decant portion of this parcel. That does have a limited timeline that we need to expend those money. The good thing about the Public Works Trust Fund is extremely low interest, so we don't want to lose that funding opportunity. We will incur some additional costs to split the bid documents. We're working with our consultant right now on narrowing that down as low as possible. We'll also likely lose some economy of scale, but it does alleviate the timing issue. So we do have a policy question at the end of the presentation regarding this, but funded, once again, phase one is completely funded. Phase two, $2.8 million Public Works Trust Fund. That leaves about a $2 million balance for the north parcel. We do anticipate that we can absorb that within utility costs primarily because the utility rate model included debt service that we haven't issued yet. So we can use that to help pay for the first 2 million. And then we'll identify some general fund money for the general fund portion of that. Phase three, just the latest construction estimate. So that's the south parcels estimated at $40 million. Once again, that's about 50-50 split. And we'll issue debt once we have the golf course ready to close. So the policy question at the end is, are you okay with splitting these two phases? And we'll come back to that. But other than that policy question, any questions about the operations facility, new or old?
Any questions? Any questions? Mr. Elfers? You're good?
Okay, 902, 906 Kincaid. That's these buildings right here at the southern end of Heritage Park. They were built in 1958. We purchased these. Well, we purchased 902. 902 is the building here that's brick face that does not have the green awning on it. 906 is the old, cities owned that building for decades now. The Sumner Downtown Association was in it at one point, but for the last 10 years, we've occupied it with our city facilities staff. We purchased 902, knowing that we had the Heritage Park project underway, and we knew that the long-term vision of that was to expand the park to use the entire block. So council used some revenue that we got from selling the library property to the library, as well as some REIT dollars to purchase that into 2022. Once we purchased that, we did explore reusing the buildings because we thought, you know, these are old buildings. Maybe there's a way that we could repurpose them into what the vision of the park was. And we quickly learned that that's not a good idea with the structural issues that these buildings face. Once again, they are about 70 years old, and they're definitely showing their age. They were possible to use, so we relocated our storm employee in there, as well as use the back of 902 for a lot of city storage. So we have everything from paint to cubicles to all sorts of stuff in the back of these buildings that we have to store somewhere. We did lease the 902 portion to Harbor Pacific, and they are the Sound Transit Garage contractor. They needed a temporary construction office, so we felt this is a good use. Unfortunately, in December, this is like, you can't make this stuff up. Unfortunately, in December, all that rain that we got actually collapsed part of the ceiling and compromised quite a bit more of the ceiling. And the building official determined that the building was no longer safe to occupy. Under the lease that Harbor Pacific had, they had the ability to go out and get an estimate and get a lease credit for repair. And they were able to secure a quote to put a new membrane roof on the building for about $5,000. But there was a lot of uncertainty of, well, what if you pull the membrane back and you have rotten sheathing, right? Which you probably do at this point. Also didn't address any of the water damage that was now in the ceiling. And when you walk in the building, there's obvious signs of mold and mildew. So once again, we bought this building knowing that we're probably going to tear it down. We are recommending the demolition. It does align with the long-term plans for the site. 902 can't be torn down without tearing down 906 because they have a shared wall. So you would displace the facility staff that are in 906. Harbor Pacific is interested, but they haven't made up their mind yet about putting a temporary job shack on the cleared site. We would have to relocate our facility staff to the cemetery location eventually. to the old cemetery building and co-occupy that with police. And then the city would rent a new storage unit, commercial storage unit, until the new operations facility is complete. The other thing with this is we have all the bollards for Heritage Park. They're stored in the back of 902. It's not feasible to move those and put them in a temporary, commercial storage unit and then bring them back every time. So we would like to enclose the restroom screening. And if you remember, there's the brick structure where we put the porta potties inside. We could put a roof on it, put a more secure door on it, and put the bollards in there. Eventually, the plan was to include that bollard storage in any sort of new building built at the park. Yeah.
What about the bollards that were built at the Heritage Park? So don't they have them already in the street?
Great question. So the black bollards are in the street. The removable bollards, which are yellow,
Right.
are the ones that block off the street for events.
Oh.
Those are the ones that are stored in the building. So just to kind of circle this back up here, the cost of demo of the building is estimated at 300,000. Storage unit rental 6,500. Includes the restroom screenings, another 25,000, and then if we want some sort of temporary use improvements for the building footprint until we can get the park completely redesigned and rebuilt, we estimate that about 150,000, and that could be shade structures, picnic tables, other hardscapes to make it usable in the interim. So we'll come back to this at the end of the presentation to ask those specific policy questions. Any other general questions about 902 and 906? All right, so big picture, we just covered a lot of the city facilities. What we didn't cover tonight are the capital needs in our park system, our sidewalks, our trails, and our street system. Those are also part of our overall city network of facilities in one form or another. We talk a lot about grants. We are great at getting grants. They really help us usually finish a project. The catch is, once you accept that grant, you got to continue the project. If you want to stay in good with the granting agencies and continue to receive more grants for other projects. Grants also can speed up timelines. You get that? A lot of things are time bound. Grant money, just because you get it 1 year, really does not mean that it's going to be around 2 to 3 years from then, right? You have a time frame you have to use it. Most grants also require some level of local dollar match, which means it's either general fund, utilities, or both, depending on the project. You can't just accept a grant not having identified those underlying local funds. The other thing is capital facilities plan. So we are updating this as part of our comprehensive plan. We are required to have an active capital facilities plan. Right now it's working its way through the planning commission. Really the purpose of the plan is to identify current facility status and future needs. It was last dated in 2015. And it will be coming to council as part of the overall comp plan update. While this is a planning document, it doesn't probably paint the full picture of everything that you're dealing with as a city for facilities. It just gives you the high level overview. Like a good example is it doesn't cover all your lift stations. It doesn't cover your parks necessarily, your trail restrooms, things of that nature. Like every well we have has a building technically over the well. It's not included in a capital facilities plan, but it has to be maintained with roofs and paint and the landscape around it, etc. So to the policy questions that we'd like some input on. First is the DMI site. And really the policy question is, should we demolish the building? Staff recommendation is yes. How should it be funded? We are fairly confident that we can cover most of this with grant funds, if not all of it, but we're really not sure what the cost of this demo is going to be, because it's not just this office building. There's also a pole building garage in the back, as well as a single family residence on site. All of them would need to be demoed. And we'd of course want to do it at the same time. If you're agreeable to this, then other council action that would need to be taken would be to award the contract if it's over 300,000 and possibly amend the budget if it can't be covered by our already allocated grant. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on what you want to do with this building.
So why do you say if it's over 300,000? Is that?
So under,
Wouldn't say less than or.
so Sumner Municipal Code requires council approved contracts, public works contracts that are over 300,000. If it's under 300,000, say it's 200, that's something that the mayor and I can execute as long as the funding has been allocated
Oh,
already.
okay, all right, that makes sense. Well,
Anybody else?
I think I agree that it should be demolished.
Councilmember Cole.
And so this talks about this says it's dependent upon grant funds. Are there any grant funds currently allocated?
Yes, there are.
But it's not, it's how much?
I don't know, I'm sorry, I should have known that. I don't know exactly how much is left on that. I don't know, if Michael or Elisa or Cassandra. Oh, Lisa has her phone out. She might know.
Your fingers are going like crazy.
I was just,
Back to that?
yeah, we can come back to that. Yeah, I was just really curious as to, where it was.
How
and
close we are.
How close, yeah.
Yeah. It's a fair question. I
In
should
the
have had that
meantime, I'll
answer.
go to Councilmember.
Thank you.
Me?
Yep. Stewart.
It's nice to meet you. I'm in favor of demolishing it. And before you're all done, I have another question, but I'll wait until you get your policy questions answered. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Elmer.
That's a good question. Yeah, I had a question. So you said there's 3 structures out there? There's the pole building, there's there's a facility that's in the picture here that got flooded, and then there's the single family residence. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and then, oh yeah, my question had to do with the so it's part of the White River project is eventually, right, this site?
Yep.
And, so that's a project that there's lots of shared costs in that project. How does the city deal with that? So if we spend money on this, does that part of our contribution toward the White River project, or is it totally separate, or?
Yeah, it absolutely is. So if we spend any local storm dollars, that's the fund it would come out of. It can count as grant match for anything else that we go for. Obviously, we can't count it more than once, so you have to kind of identify, okay, this, let's say it's 100,000 from storm this time, that goes towards the grant match for this grant. Right, you can't use it for this grant, then a year later use it for this grant.
That's too bad.
Yeah.
I support the demolition.
Thank you.
Councilmember Vitello, do you have any more?
No, I think so.
You didn't have the example.
Go ahead.
Oh, I just forgot to mention that I would support the demolition.
Thank
I
you.
am curious about the grant dollars, but definitely would support it.
Thank you.
There we go.
Perfect. Operations facility, the new one, the policy question is, are you comfortable with us splitting it into phases to keep it moving? We have no concerns. We think that the value of using the Public Works Trust Fund outweighs the extra costs that we're gonna incur by splitting it out. It also deals with the timing issue that is just gonna be more of a challenge later on.
Are we good with that?
Okay.
Two thumbs up. What about you? Or 3, 4?
I feel like I haven't been involved in the conversations about it, so I feel like I'm a little bit behind on it because all the design, but do you guys have a number? What are the additional costs that would be incurred by splitting it? Do you know that?
Well, we know some, we don't know all of it, and let me explain why. We know that we have to split the bid docs, so it can be bid separately, which means that we're going to incur about $200,000 worth of professional services costs to do that. And then when you split them, right now, you're potentially having to take a project that was 18 months of construction and maybe now it's 24, so you might have additional construction management. Because now you're not running them concurrently, and then there might be other costs that we don't totally understand, because if you have one person building the north and the south parcels, they're mobilizing one time. Right, economy of scale type challenges, and I don't know if we'll ever be able to quantify that number.
Okay, well, I'm gonna follow up on my question earlier, just because like, so you talked about designing it and maybe looking at some options of including some capacity issues. Is this fully designed and both the full phase fully designed and kind of ready, permit ready? Or can you maybe where we're at on it?
Yeah, it's completely permit ready, CUP permit, land use building, it's ready. So what we did is we took the building, I have a pointer on this, you can see, but the building on the far right there, that kind of runs long and has a lighter gray roof. That's the administration building. That's where all of our staff is based out of. And we were able to convert one of the large conference rooms. We reconfigured that and were able to put 6 to 8, depending on how we configure how many cubicles in there. Might result in pre-treatment personnel being in there, might result in engineer techs being in there. We're not sure exactly from City Hall, but there's the ability to place staff out there. And even though we eliminated a conference room to do that, the operations staff, as well as us here at City Hall, we feel there's adequate other training facilities and employee space in there that, they don't enjoy today. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll give a thumbs mostly up because I want to ask more questions, but I'll do it
Yeah,
later.
we're happy to sit down with you and go through the design, because obviously a lot of the council here has been working on this project for about 5 years now.
Yeah,
There's a lot to it.
all right.
Oh, 902, 906 Kincaid. So we are recommending that you demolish this building as well. We do think that it's worth at least exploring temporary improvements to cost those out and see what they would be. While you can put down pavement when you tear down the buildings, it'd be nice if it was somewhat usable for the public, whether it's just picnic tables and shade sails. But nothing too extravagant, but we do feel like it's worth a little bit of investment to make it usable until we can build the building out in the future. How should it be funded? We are recommending that you consider using your council strategic reserve fund for this. This is kind of the first major step in this project to build the activated alleys as well as the new heritage park and building. And we feel that that's really the intent of the council strategic reserve fund, was to add fuel to some of these projects when necessary to keep them moving forward. Right now, so I know I'm going to get asked, the current balance, I am prepared for this one, Deputy Mayor. The current balance in the council strategic fund is $1,104,000. That does not include the contribution of another $350,000 that is scheduled for this year. If you were to not spend any money out of that strategic fund, you anticipate an ending year balance of $1,454,000 and some change. Okay. Just as a reminder, what we've used this money for before, we used $1 million of the strategic reserve fund for the town center utility Wooner project to complete that. We had also at one point allocated some of these funds for the Wood and Main intersection, but we were able to secure some grant funds to pay for that. The other advantage of using some of your strategic funds for the demolition is it will count as a grant match for any grants that we go to complete the park. So we do need to put local dollars in at some point, so might as well put some in now that we can use for that. So if you agree with that, what we would do is any contract over 300,000, you'd have to approve. The demo probably will be. We'd definitely be consulting with you about any proposed temporary use. And then we'd need to amend the budget for all costs associated. So I'm happy to answer questions and hear your thoughts on this.
Right, Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you. So the first two questions appear to be one or the other. Is that true?
No, because you could demo the buildings and just either put sod down or concrete down. We're actually leaning towards concrete from a maintenance standpoint. We wouldn't have to then irrigate it, mow it, and all that. The temporary improvements would be additional, so the use of picnic tables, maybe some shade structures, etc. So you can't do number 2, the temporary improvements, if you don't tear it down, but you don't have to do the temporary improvements just because you tear it down.
Okay,
I got that one.
I'm in favor of yes, for those, and I congratulate you on putting in the worst possible pictures for all of these things. Job well done, very convincing.
Did you have something to say, Jason?
No, I just pointed to Ted, I was very sorry.
Councilmember Potato?
No, I think that I agree with the staff recommendations, and using our council funds is a good idea.
Councilmember Brown?
Tear it down.
I love your new computer. Councilmember Cole?
I agree with the staff's recommendations.
Andy Alford?
Right now it's being used for nothing and we just bought it for the park, that's correct?
Correct.
Okay. I don't like spending money, but and you said there's grant funds, but not yet. It'll be matching. It'll be applied to that.
Right. I mean, we anticipate that this project will be eligible for grant funds. We also feel it's pretty competitive. I know that Mr. Berry this week is even meeting with RCO, who's so excited about this project. They're coming out to look at it. So I do see a lot of positives here. While we purchased it, knowing that we were going to demo it, it's being sped up by the need that we can't even temporarily use it because the building officials said it's unsafe.
Okay, but the design isn't done on this, so I might be able to
No,
see it as we're thinking.
You're
about
gonna see this one as it goes. So you recall just about a week ago, you guys approved the Pierce County Lodging Tax Grant, which actually will include the design of this building this year.
it. Okay.
So.
I'm good with it.
All right.
And I did pick some bad pictures, but there's a lot more I could have picked. So the positives, the choices you're giving us tonight are positive, right? It's gonna help move us in the right direction. We still have some challenges, long-term funding for general fund facilities such as City Hall, Senior Center, and Metro, Animal Shelter, it's still to be determined. I think we can only do so much at a time, and we're taking some good positive steps. The wastewater treatment facility where the dryer is in design, it's going to go to pre-procurement here later this year. And I would assume, Mr. Close and I have talked that in the next year's budget, probably be asking for some money to do a building assessment at the wastewater treatment facility to really understand our long-term facility needs out there. But the big picture, right? Everything was blue before, just dealing with the policy recommendations you just made, as well as primarily the new operations facility. A lot of these things turn green and you resolved, which I think is really positive. And I know our staff is excited to get to that operations facility. I know some of the people behind me are tired of me asking when we're going to close on the golf course.
And in front of you.
And in front of me, a lot of people in this room. I feel the pressure to get this thing closed so we can move forward, because it is really going to impact our ability to continue to provide the needed valued services and help us achieve our mission. So thank you. Happy to answer any last questions you may have.
Any last questions for him on any of these? Go ahead, Earl. Yeah, you again.
Thank you for this presentation. I imagine that it probably cost you some sleepless nights getting this together. My observation, knowing how governments work, is to do a Band-Aid approach on a lot of things over the years. And I think what we're looking at here is the huge cost of the city's failure to meet the needs at the time they exist, and putting Band-Aids on, thinking, well, it'll last longer. Which you've heard me say before, the pay me now or pay me more later. I would really like to somehow, if you could encapsulate a lot of this into a total cost analysis, so we don't kick the can and we don't end up paying more later, but figure out a funding strategy to do everything. It's imperative that we give our staff potable water, a restroom, reasonable workspace. I'm surprised the unions haven't stepped up and made this an issue. I'm not advertising that, but I'm just shocked. So that's my request, is that if you and the staff could come up with something to be able to say, okay, let's do this. Instead of buying a used car with 3 shaky wheels, let's put forth the money and buy a new car. And we'll figure funding out, whether the utilities pays their fair share, which I'm sure they will. We've got to stop this mentality, because it's not going to change. The conditions won't change. So that's my request. If there's some way you could do that between your intelligence and my finance director's friend intelligence, get your heads together and figure out how can we do this? And then bring it back to the council, bring it to the finance committee if you want. I'd love to have that discussion.
Thank you. And I think you have a lot of very well stated points that a lot of myself, and I know a lot of people behind me have been feeling like at some point you cannot continue to Band-Aid this. Told the mayor the other night, this is probably the one topic that keeps me up more than anything else at night, is our facilities. And I know some of the staff behind me feel the exact same way. It's kind of like whack-a-mole, like, oh my gosh, how are we gonna solve this facility problem today? What's the fire? And it's been a lot of temporary solutions with the eye of getting the operations facility built. Will solve a lot of these, but it doesn't solve anything in this building, including the police department, which we know is going to grow in the coming years because our population is going to grow. Your request is already on our minds of how we're going to quantify our future needs, and really getting that capital facilities plan as the first step, and then putting dollars behind it. At our council retreat in the spring, yes, we're going to talk a lot about budget, but we're also going to talk about how do you accomplish things like our parks and trail plan? How do you accomplish our facility needs? How do you accomplish our street needs? What are the different tools in your toolbox that you can access if you desire to do so?
Yeah, and I think that the citizens of Sumner in some small way will likely encourage us to do what we can for their benefit, and they may be in favor of a bond issue or some other funding measures that, I mean, it's, there's gotta be some way that we can do this. And this will put Sumner on the roadmap as a successful city for years to come if we can do this and get things taken care of. That's my opinion anyway. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Nothing? Mr. Alberts, nothing? All right, I think you're good.
Can I move on to my report, Mayor?
Yep.
Two things. First off, I just mentioned our council retreat. We have set the date for that as Saturday, May 4th, probably 9 to 3. We'll firm up the times and location as we get a little bit closer. I think Councilmember Mateo is going to say that she's busy.
I'll be gone from April 30th to May 26th.
Sorry, you have to come back.
Well, I'll be,
Join virtually.
I don't know where I'll be that day.
Those dates, April 26th to when?
April 30th to May 26th. And I don't know if it'll be very easy to get with.
Okay. Well, right now it's tentatively scheduled for May 4th. We'll talk to the mayor and see if we want to try to adjust that, find a date that all of our council. My ask of the rest of the council members, if you have some specific days that do not work for you in April, May, if you could email them to me, that'd be appreciated. So we can try to pick a date when all of you can be there. The other thing, just a reminder, we do have an executive session tonight with no action to follow. So just wanted to remind you of that. That's it.
All right, do we have any council issues with meetings or committees? Council member Stewart.
Okay, the Public Works Committee, the next one, I believe, is February 5th, is it?
5th or 6th?
I will not be here for that, so I need an alternate to sit in on that. In this potato.
I'll check my calendar. Well, I know there's something going on the sixth, so I'll just check. when I get home.
Okay, thank you. And then finance committee is, I believe
It should be the first Wednesday. Oh, it's.
did we change it to Thursday?
Yes.
Yes.
Second Thursday?
The 15th of February.
15th of February.
Hey, I won't be here for that either, so I'll need to have my alternate for that if there is one.
Do we have an alternate?
It says Cole on here.
Deputy Mayor Cole is the alternate.
Can you do that, the 15th?
February 15th.
Mhm.
That's all. Thank you.
Any other
4 p.m.
meeting or anything like that? Changes? All right, none. So we are going to adjourn the special study session into an executive session for the purpose of discussing with legal counsel representing the agency litigation or potential litigation per RCW 42.30.11011. Announce the time, and it is at 7:40
15 minutes.
for a period of
15 minutes.
15 minutes, and there will be no action to follow. All right. Let's do it.
We are gonna go in the other room.
Go in the other room.
I know.